This video, we diverged from the textbook, and in your package you should have received a handout, and that handout is, the top is called Broker Relationship Act, Principles and Practices. So you need to get that handout because we're going to go over this chapter. Well, it's really not a chapter. The handout covers 14 questions, and it's Oklahoma oriented. Earlier we discussed agency on the previous chapter. We have something a little different here in Oklahoma. So let's go to the board. Several years ago, the powers that be decided that agency was, we wanted to look for an alternative to agency, which is the strict relationship between principal and agent. And so after, quite a bit of discussion and soul searching, the state went to something slightly different. What we went to is the Oklahoma Broker Relationship Act. And this handout describes most of the information, or the information that you'll need to answer these questions. You're also, in your package, have a questions and answers, and we'll go over those. So we do things pretty different in this video. We go over the handout, the bullet points, the information, then we're going to ask and answer those questions. I utilize those questions as a teaching tool. So as we go through it, you really learn a lot just by looking at those questions and answers, because it shows exactly what a transaction broker is. So let's go here to the board. Oklahoma Broker Relationship Act. What did it do? First thing you need to know is it replaced agency. There's a legal term called abrogated. It abrogated agency. In other words, we took the agent part, kind of got rid of it, and replaced it with something different. So first thing you need to know, it replaced agency. It abrogated agency. Next, we have a party to the transaction, which would be your buyers and your sellers and our clients. Calls them a party. And here are your two choices. So in agency state, you're an agent. Here, you're either a transaction broker or a single party. Now, these two things right here, underneath transaction broker and single party, are the best way to remember all of this if you can apply just a basic concept. And that basic concept is, when you're a transaction broker, I kind of look at this as a ref. It's the best way to answer these questions. As a single party, you're a coach. Now let's take a look at the material here, and as we read through it, then you're going to get an idea of why the best way to look at this as transaction broker is a ref, and the best way to look at a single party as a coach, because as you go through this, you're going to see some terminology that makes this a stark contrast between the two, and it helps you remember it so you can answer the questions on the test. Okay, let's first go to the first about half of this handout. First bullet point there, a transaction broker is a broker who provides services by. Now let me stop there. Underline or highlight assisting a party in a transaction. Okay, so you're assisting. I call it enabling language. When you see certain terminology, it indicates something. When you see assisting, that means you're a transaction broker. You're helping. You're a moderator, a mediator. You're negotiating back and forth, but all negotiation is happening with the seller and the buyer in the transaction. And what you're doing is you're kind of like a ref. Now, what's a ref do? Do they want any one team to win? No. What they want is everybody play fair, make sure that they make all the disclosures properly, or properly disclose all to all parties, all transactions. Everything in the process is kind of like a referee. Okay, they want both teams to go away. It's not about winning or losing or having one win and one lose. It's about the process and making sure that everyone goes away, I guess for lack of a better term, a winner. Next here is a single party, and we'll diverge into that here in just a second, but let's go over the second and third bullet point. A transaction broker has the duty to treat all parties honestly. The next, a transaction broker has the duty to exercise skill and care, which includes presenting offers when they are written. And then it goes into the single party. A single party broker is a broker who has entered into a written brokerage agreement. Now let me stop there. The only way that you could enter into an agreement with your buyer or seller as a single party is it has to be in writing. If you don't have anything in writing, you're assumed to be a transaction broker. No matter your actions, no matter how you act or whatever you do in the transaction, you're assumed to be a transaction broker if you just don't have anything in writing. So the only way to become a single party broker whenever you're listing or selling property is you have to have somewhere that the seller or buyer says, yes, you're my single party broker. So that first part, written brokerage agreement with a party in a transaction to provide services for the, now let's stop there. The what kind of, or what of that party, and it says the benefit of that party. Okay, let's go back to here. What does the coach do? Coach is there to benefit that party. Okay, so that's a good example. If you look at transaction, they're assisting, helping. They still have all their duties and requirements of the law, but they're just helping through the process and getting it from point A to point Z. Single party, on the other hand, is a coach. And where this gets further defined is down here under the confidential information that we'll deal with here in a little bit. All right. Next section there that starts out the Oklahoma brokerage. I'm sorry, back up. A broker must enter into a written brokerage agreement prior to providing services as a single party broker. So what this says is that if you're going to represent someone as a single party broker, you need to do it immediately or at first opportunity. So when you're dealing with a client, do that quickly as you can. Get that under contract, get that single party in writing, and then you can move forward. You really don't want to do this after showing them properties or dealing with a party weeks into the deal and then about to write a contract and go, oh yeah, gosh, I forgot, I need you to sign something. It's in your best interest, and it's based on the rules and the law. It says you need to get that done as soon as possible. Now, next one. The Oklahoma brokerage relationship law provides that a broker may be either a transaction broker without an agreement, written agreement, a transaction broker with a written agreement. So let's stop there for a second. You could be a transaction broker either way. If you don't have it in writing, you're automatically a transaction broker. The law looks at you as just representing a person as just, quote, the ref throughout the process. But if you do have an agreement that says, I will be a transaction broker, that's perfectly acceptable. But the only way to guarantee that you develop relationship as a single party broker is it has to be in writing. So that's kind of repetitive. I've said that 3 or 4 times, but it's important to know because it'll, in all likelihood, it'll be on your exam. Next point. Before a party signs a contract to purchase, lease, option, or exchange real estate, a broker who is performing services as a transaction broker without a written brokerage agreement shall describe and disclose in writing the broker's role to the party. Okay, where are these things? Where are these paragraphs and disclosures? When you go on board a company, then they will provide you with these documents. In our example, in our area, it's actually written into, whenever you list a property, it's actually written into the listing agreement itself, which discloses what you will be doing or what representation they will have when you're listing the property. When you first deal with a buyer, there's a buyer-broker agreement that will state this information too. So these documents, when you get into the practice and you get on with your brokers, will be afforded to you in the form of disclosures that deal with these particular instances whenever you're dealing with your clients. So that's where these are. So that last that said, describe and disclose writing broker's role to the party, and it's before you get into that relationship, then those documents will be provided to you. Okay, next is really important. Vicarious liability is imposing liability on another person based upon the relationship between the two parties. I know that's kind of wordy, but this is vicarious liability. When you have vicarious liability, this is indicative of a single party relationship. So here's what vicarious liability is. If the party and the single party brokerage, if the seller or the buyer says something and then the single party turns around and says it, then that's just like they're kind of joined at the hip. So anything that this person, as the licensee, says or does is pretty much like the party said it, the buyer or seller said it. So they're kind of, I use the terminology, it may not be the best way, but they're kind of joined at the hip. Whatever you say is just like the party saying it. Okay, so that's what they call vicarious liability. You don't have vicarious liability in a transaction brokerage relationship, which is kind of the ref. You're just being the mediator, but you still have all those obligations you must meet as a licensee. But the single party, when you see vicarious liability, just remember that equals single party. Okay. Next paragraph, the largest one there. The Oklahoma Broker Relationship Law provides that confidential information may not be disclosed without consent of the appropriate party. When you have conversations with your buyers and sellers, everything is expected to be in confidence. All your conversations, your motivations, and all these things are supposed to be remain in confidence. Unless they say, sure, go ahead and say this. Sure, go ahead and say that. Say I'll take less. Say I'll do this. But everything that you discuss with your client should remain in confidence. Next sentence. Confidential information includes that a party is willing to pay more or accept less than what is being offered. Okay, let me point you over here to the board again. Here's confidential information. These are the three things you got to keep your mouth closed on until they say, sure, go ahead and say it. Money, up or down. So if a seller says, list my house at $100,000, I might consider something less. Well, you don't go out as a licensee say, well, I'm listing at $100,000, and they said they might consider something less. That's a violation. You can't do that. If they said, yeah, go ahead and tell everybody that they might consider something less, or bring offers or something like that, and you get that, have that agreed to or in writing somewhere, then you can go ahead and say that. But again, everything that's in confidence should remain there until they say it's okay to say it. So this is one. Can't go up or down. Same way with a buyer. Buyer says, well, I'm going to come in, offer $95,000. I know they're asking $100,000, and we'll probably go to $100,000. Again, no money, up or down. Motivation. Sellers are really, really desperate to get out of this property. They just, they're done with it all. They've been on the market for 2 years. They're just done. They just want out of it. Could that influence in some way? I think it could. So that's motivation. How about the buyers are really, really, really excited about this house, and they said they'd do anything to get it, and those are also things like that. You can't say that. That's also influencing. That's really should be remain in confidence. And then the last is terms. Any terms, whether it's a closing cost, possibly they'll pay closing costs, possibly they other than financial approval and things like that, they just can't get into terms. Maybe if they do this, we'll pay that. Maybe if they go a little lower, we'll ask for this. Any terms throughout, as that negotiation process unfolds, can't be telling them that kind of thing. Okay, so that's confidential information. I'll finish up that paragraph. And I'll start over here. The second sentence on the second to last paragraph. Confidential information includes a party is willing to pay more, accept less. The next sentence, that a party is willing to agree to financial terms, which are different from those offered, or the motivating factors of the parties purchasing, selling, leasing, optioning, or exchanging the property. All right. Last paragraph. Upon termination, expiration, or completion of performance of a broker relationship, a broker has no further duties or responsibilities to the party except to account for all monies and properties relating to the transaction and keep confidential information received by the broker during the relationship with that party. So once you're done with a transaction, remember two things, because it'll be on your test, most likely. Once it's done, transaction is closed. Account for all monies. And then the last, keep confidential information confidential. Those are the two things. All right, now let's go to the test your understanding. And it's the Q&A dealing with this. And what I'm going to do is, in this particular video, I'm going to go over the odd numbered questions. And then once you get done with this video, I suggest you come back like all the other videos, go back and start doing the matching quizzes. And in this case, I would recommend that you do all the even numbered questions and then come back to it at a later date when you get done with all the modules. So this helps you kind of learn the process, and then it immediately goes back and gives you some reinforcement. So what I'm going to do is in I think there's just 12 questions. Yes, there's 12 questions, and I'm going to go over the odd numbers, and then when you're done with this video, I suggest you go to the even numbers, and that'll help you reinforce the material. First, number 3, an important disclosure about the broker relationship, which is a single-party broker must make, is, and that's C, the party is never vicariously liable for the actions of either transaction brokers or single-party brokers. So what they're saying is, one of the most important disclosures you're going to make between these two is, between the transaction and the single party, is that you're vicariously liable for the single party. You're not vicariously liable as a transaction broker. That's a very important distinction that you need to learn. Go to number 5. I'm sorry, I skipped over number 1. Go back to number 1. Broker, or rather, when a broker is providing services to one party in a transaction without being an advocate for the party, he or she is, that's A, transaction broker. Now let's go back to 5. The Broker Relationship Act provides that when a transaction is terminated, the broker must A, keep confidential information confidential. So that goes back to that last paragraph on your material, where once the transaction is done, that is one of the issues you have to do. Account for all monies, and then also keep everything confidential. Go to 7. When working with one party, a broker, and that's D, may do so as either a transaction broker or a single party broker with a written agreement. All right. Number 9, in Oklahoma, the common law of agency, and that's D, has been abrogated by the Oklahoma Broker Relationship Act. That's that terminology you need to understand. Abrogated, or to you and me, replaced. Now go to 11. A transaction broker may provide services, and that's C, without advocating for either party. So as you read through these questions, you're going to see something unfolding here. And what's unfolding in front of you when you're dealing with a transaction broker versus a single party are some real obvious things as you start reading through it. And that is these two things. When you're dealing with the buyer and seller, you have two choices. You're a transaction broker or a single party. When you see those enabling language where it says advocating for, what would that be? A coach. You're advocating for person. If you're an intermediary, some of that other terminology it's written in here, you'll see assisting. You're just helping everybody along. Then that indicates you'll be a transaction broker. All right. That concludes this video over Broker Relationship Act.